And we are recording. I'm told that when we do our sharing, if we want to, we can pause the recording. So you can feel free to share and it won't go everywhere. So I'm Shelley. Thank you very much, Hannah, for the introduction and the moderation, and Roberta for the co-moderation, and AK in general for holding this beautiful virtual conference. I'm a writer, teacher, and adoptee in Oregon, and I'm going to go over what we're going to do today. We're going to do a fair amount of writing, so feel free to get a new document or journal page ready. Normally, I do teach this class over a couple of weeks, and we have 90 minutes. So there would be more time built in for the writing, and we would talk about it and do stuff with it. But if things today feel a little squished, it's only so that we can get more experiments in. And you can revisit all of these experiments in the future at your leisure. A big point, which I've heard in some of the other workshops, is do I have to be a writer and what makes a writer? Some people feel that writing has to be very pedigreed, and you can only do it if you studied with that one person on a mountaintop in 1987. And it turns out that's not true at all. So we're going to dive into what speculative nonfiction is in just a minute. But first we'll do a little warm up. Never feel like you have to do anything good or organized. This is a lab where you get to play with words. And you don't have to send it to the New Yorker if you don't want to. So let's begin at the end. If you'd be so kind, go ahead and jot down a list of 3 to 5 moments where you felt really good. This could be a time you felt super cool or smart or helpful. Maybe you held a boundary you didn't think you could. Think about moments that feel like you were the most you, and you were the happiest to be yourself and your truest self. Go ahead and write. If you want, you can turn your cameras off, and I think everybody's muted, so that's great. And I will bring you back in 3 to 4 minutes. Moments that make you, yes, I will try to give prompts to record and not record too. It will take a village, but we can do it. The next part is go ahead and look over your list and just circle your favorite, or make sure you remember, because we're going to come back to it in a little bit. Okay, doesn't take that long to circle. I assume you've gotten that. So speculative nonfiction is kind of like a genre that is currently taking shape. So it's kind of an exciting time for it. We've probably read or heard about speculative fiction, and speculative is a fancy way to say it just adds in supernatural elements, but is maybe not overtaken by the supernatural elements. So it's not quite sci-fi and it's not quite fantasy, but it's also definitely not normal. And the definition is any story containing imaginative, futuristic, or supernatural elements. So putting speculative and nonfiction together can immediately feel wrong because nonfiction is supposed to be true. And isn't it illegal to bring in just those things, imagination, the future, and supernatural elements to a memoir? There are people that will probably always say, yes, very illegal. But today I challenge you to think about, is it? Because can anyone ever really tell all sides of a story? Can you even tell what happened so far in this meeting accurately, according to every single person? That would be a really big task, and even reported memoirs and journalism often have slants, whether they're biased or not. And when you think of like a famous person who has written their memoir, is it guaranteed to be completely true and objective? Or sometimes things slip in. So what if we thought of nonfiction as our truth as adoptees, and just openly admitted that sometimes we are not right in our memories, and memories change and deconstruct. And sometimes we can't always see the bigger picture. And regardless of that, our unprovable experiences are still true and trustworthy. It can be kind of a radical idea. Plus, when you think about it, our lives might already be sort of speculative when you think about it. If you've ever done any kind of drug and maybe had a nice long chat with the universe, that does technically qualify as pretty speculative. Or if you've interacted with a spirit or a ghost, if you have an item or a person or a place or a thing that's lucky to you, if you've altered your body with new materials or maybe even animal parts or robot parts. Some people use crystals or astrology to guide their lives, or if you've gotten goosebumps over a coincidence, or when you followed your gut, even if someone says, don't do that, and you say, no, my gut tells me I have to do this. Or if you've wished you'd lived in another era or pretended you lived in another era, or spoken to a deceased person for comfort, or maybe just to like keep them updated, just to let them know how you're doing. All of this stuff qualifies as speculative. So we already have some magical elements baked into the lives we're living. And by the way, if you do all of these things, let me know, because I feel like we would be excellent friends, because these are great habits. Think of it this way, our lives also use gravity, which we know exists. But I would have a hard time explaining exactly why and how gravity works in my life, the same way I might not have all the exact language of how astrology or feeling lucky has affected my life. Oh yeah, and there is one other element that might sway you to believing that our particular stories are in fact really speculative, which is of course the actual act of adoption, because are adoptees living more and more speculative nonfiction? I don't know. Have you or any adoptee you know believed yourself to be a specific ethnicity, only to later find out they're not? Or interacted with genetic family members, but didn't know it at the time? Felt purposely kept in the dark about your own life by either adoptive family members or genetic family? Have you ever heard of anyone being non-consensually switched for culture and language? Maybe as a baby, maybe as a toddler, maybe even older. Perhaps adoptees wonder about genetic family alternate timelines, and the governments may or may not have blocked actual records to your origin story. All of these things really mess with people. And maybe all of these coincidences and weirdnesses mean we actually can put in all of this stuff that has happened, along with our daydreams and our ideas and our make-believe and our pretend journeys into our writing. A lot of stories adoptees hear are to make our lives seem less speculative. They play it down for us, which we now know means nothing, because we just looked at what all of us, even non-adopted people, do and how their lives are non-speculative, are speculative anyway. So it is memoir, and it is nonfiction, and your life very likely is quite speculative. But most of all, it is still your truth. So let's get ready to do a little writing, because I've been talking a lot. Now we're going to actively turn down the noise from the stories we've been told so that we can hear our own. So up first, I'm going to give you about 3 or 4 minutes to do a list of 3 things that you would like to write about in your adoption experience. They could be concrete moments. They could be lifelong themes. They could be ideas you can't quite put your finger on. Literally anything. There is no wrong answer. If you think of more than 3, just jot them down and kind of keep tabs on your top 3. So go ahead and do that, and I'll call you back in a couple minutes. And we can pause recording. Welcome back. Hopefully everybody got at least something. And it'll be fine if you didn't, because we're gonna do it again. It's the exact same thing. You're gonna do 3 points that you want to write about from your adoption story. The trick here is you cannot repeat anything you've already written down. Kind of trying to filter out the noise that comes up first and loud to listen to things that are quieter and deeper. So 3 points that you want to write about. I'll call you back in a few minutes and we can pause recording. Thank you. So come on back. Sometimes it's easier to do this exercise the second time, and sometimes it's way harder. You feel like you already put all your good stuff out there and there can't possibly be more, but there always does seem to be more. So whatever your experience was, finding your 3 new points is exactly right. As I said before, many of our initial responses might be really automatic or rote. Like when someone asks you at the store, "How are you?" and you say fine without thinking. When really, if you listen to what's going on inside of you, the real answer might be something like, "Well, I have cancer and I feel like I'm doing it all wrong because I don't like telling people, because then they want to have emotions and expect me to walk them through it when I'm the one that feels like I need support." That's a purely hypothetical situation, by the way. So we're going to find out what is really underneath your fine by doing this one final time. It is the exact same prompt for the third time. Everything you've written so far is ineligible. You're going to find 3 different points that you could talk about from your adoption story. You can, however, zoom in or zoom out on a point that you've already talked about. Maybe there's like an underbelly under one of these things. Maybe something a little bit truer, something a little stickier. Go ahead and sit with it and see what happens. There's no wrong answer. You'll have a couple minutes and I'll call you back and we can pause recording, please. Okay. So hopefully everyone has 3 points. If you do need another minute, you can wave at me and we'll take another second because we do need 3 points to move on. Also, am I in your house looking over your shoulder? If you need to borrow a point that you've already done, that's okay too. I won't tell. So before we dive into the actual writing exercises, let's take a break because digging around in our emotions can sometimes be a big thing. So just take a quick moment to connect with your body. You can shake your hands, you can make fists, you can stretch, you can look at something far across the room, use your long distance vision, whatever you want. It's completely correct. Just take a second. Okay. So our next prompt, you are going to look at your 3 points and pick one that hopefully involves another person. And then you are going to write, it can be a scene, or you can just sort of pre-write about that point, but you're going to change the other person into an animal or a plant. It does not matter which animal or plant you choose. You get to decide, and you can lean on lore or bias or typical behavior of the plant or animal. We're going to do this, and it changes the other person to a creature, which lets you decide which parts of them are important to your story. You are the boss of just how much humanity remains in them. It could be a walrus that speaks perfect English, or it could be a walrus that just stares at you. You get to decide. If you get bored of that animal, you have a pass and you just change it to a different animal. It's fine. Just keep writing. Just keep writing with them as an animal. There is often like an impulse to change yourself, but you are already perfect. So they're going to change this time. You can do this again later where you change yourself into an animal, but not now. So we're going to give you about 8 minutes. So enough time to like sort of sink in and get a little juicy. So happy writing. And if you can't think of an animal, I already mentioned a walrus, so do that. So, yes. Back on, that's probably. All right, so hopefully that felt interesting. The reason we do this particular one for me is that sometimes adoptees don't give themselves credit, which is weird, for things they're actually really good at. And one of the things sometimes some people are good at is seeing discrepancies between a person's actions and their words. And this prompt helps validate all of the unconscious data that you arguably have been collecting your entire life. So if you wanted to change someone to a rooster, for example, that lets you say that someone is maybe small and loud and overconfident without saying it explicitly. You're sort of turning up and down the knobs on what you want. And this, again, is something that you can do over and over again. You can choose the same person and do different animals, and you will find that some things will continuously stay the same because they don't want to change, because to you and your interpretation of them, that is the truth. And that is really valuable data to move forward with. Sometimes you change them to a different animal and they always pick up a different accent, which probably tells you something else about them. So good job. I know 8 minutes can sort of feel like a long time. Hopefully you got to just kind of relax into it. So drink some water, maybe take a breath, wiggle a little if you need to. Our next prompt is going to be picking one of your 2 remaining points and then setting that point or memory or idea in a science fiction world. Putting it in a different genre does a couple of things. First, it gives you a chance to decide how you want to portray the setting of this experience. Changes a lot if you set this memory or idea in a space prison camp, or if it's a virtual reality sparkly utopia. There may or may not be lasers, who knows? And secondly, even if you don't really love sci-fi, still try doing this prompt, because each genre has different rules. And in sci-fi, we know there's probably going to be technology that you and I don't have access to yet. It could be on the moon or on a spaceship. It could also be on Earth, but Earth would look very different. And there may or may not be robots that are there to help, hurt, or somewhere in the middle. I would encourage you to just let a lot of free association happen, introduce all and any science fiction elements that you want. And if you start writing them and you don't like them, drop them, pick new ones. It's fine. Because we're just playing, we're just experimenting. So see what happens when you take your adoption story off planet. I'm going to give you another 8 minutes. So feel free to get campy or scary or just whatever feels fun. Go ahead and just kind of have an interesting time with this one. And I'll see you back here soon. That would be great. All right, so hopefully you found yourself in snazzy matching jumpsuits and all sorts of good science fiction stuff. One fun thing is the rules of every genre are a little bit different. So that's why sci-fi is different than Western. So there are similarities, which is different than comedy, which is different than romance, which is different than every other genre. So it can be really interesting to play with maybe a very serious moment that you want to write about with a comedic frame, just to see what happens. Remember, you can try this stuff and it can fail spectacularly. You still learn things from doing that. And you still might find little nuggets where you're like, wow, that's actually kind of great, that you can take moving forward. Because if our first drafts were our final drafts, that would be the real utopia, wouldn't it? So our next prompt. So you have 1 prompt left from your 3, and you can choose which of these to do. If neither of them quite resonate with you, again, I am not the police, you can pick a different point that you've written. If one says, pick me for this one. So your choices are, you can write that memory or experience or about it in second person, which means instead of I was adopted, you would write you are adopted. A lot of times we see this in very specific circumstances, and we don't always see it that often. It comes up in letters. You write letters in second person. I'm not necessarily sold that you should write a letter here, but if a letter falls out, that's fine. Your other choice is to write it from a narrator that is not a person or a thing that you're really interacting with in your story. It could be someone or something that doesn't even exist at all in your story. You just put them in. Maybe you did have an English butler. I did not have an English butler as a child. And so one time I did this and decided an English butler would tell my story, and they're narrating for you. A literal fly on the wall. Or if you're writing about, you know, a scene where it's like Christmas time, maybe the Christmas tree could be the one narrating. Again, there are no rules. It could be your favorite Muppet. I would love to know what animal thinks of your adoption journey. The only rule is the narrator you choose is 100% on your side. They will never doubt you. Ever. And they will always believe you, and they will always back you up, which is pretty rad when you think about it. Gotta use some of that sometimes. So again, we're gonna do it for about 8 minutes. And then we'll come back. This is our last big writing prompt. And then we'll do a couple other things and we'll wrap up. And we probably will actually get out of here a little bit early. So if we can pause recording, I'll see you very soon. Happy writing. All right, welcome back. This particular exercise kind of does two different things. One is, I find as an adoptee, sometimes there's a lot of like pressure to justify or prove an experience, and that falls on the adoptee themselves. By having a different entity narrate that you can count on, remove some of that pressure, even though you are the person writing that other narrator. It's just kind of a weird way in to feel a little bit more comfortable about believing yourself, which is sometimes a thing. And there was a second point, but I forgot it. So we'll just move right along like it never happened. Because I don't know what happened, but my notes went away. So that's fine. Anyway, at this point, we do have time to share if you want to read one of your prompts. And let me be very clear. The point of reading one would be so that you get to hear what you wrote. None of us expect anything close to perfection, though it would be very intimidating if you did. These are like not even first drafts, right? These are just ideas. These are just fun. So if anybody would like to share a part of one of the experiments they did, we would be happy to do that. You can raise your little hand, and you also don't have to. We can just gloss right through this if anybody doesn't want to share, which is fine. Maybe it's all just swear words, or if you wrote as animal, it would be very hard to read aloud. Suzanne, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hi.
Hi. Go ahead and read whenever you're ready.
Okay, just tell me when to stop. I'll stop. I'll tell me when to stop.
Okay, there you go. That's
All right.
empowering you. Oh, wait, real quick first. Can we pause recording? Please. And now that the secrets are safe, we will move along to the end, which is, of course, the beginning. So go ahead and go back all those minutes ago to the circled moment where you felt most you. This will sound weird potentially, but I find a lot of times writing about adoption stuff kind of unearths people a little bit. And I do want you to sleep tonight. So we're going to do this as kind of a grounding to come back to a moment, because maybe you went somewhere you didn't totally want to stay after this class. So for just a couple minutes, we'll go ahead and write about not necessarily the moment and rewriting the actual moment that it happened. Write about what it feels like to remember this moment. If that doesn't make a lot of sense, just write about the details of the moment as best you can. And remember, the rule is you can't do it wrong. So try your best, I guess. So we can pause recording and I'll see you in like 3 minutes. Go ahead and wrap up. Perfect. Welcome back, everyone. I find this is a nice way to sort of ground yourself at the end, because as far out into the world as you travel, it's always good to make sure you build in time to come back, because you can feel a little unmoored if you just write and then go make dinner and then you're kind of grumpy the rest of the night. You maybe don't know why. So and again, this is another thing that you can always come back to, even if you're having a bad day unrelated to adoption. Is that possible? Find out next time. Just remembering times where you really felt like you can be very powerful. And that concludes this wonderful lab. I really want to thank all of you for coming and for hanging out and for writing. If you like the idea of writing in community with other adoptees, there are many different wonderful options. There's only 3 of them listed here, but there are definitely more. And Heffron runs year-long generative classes, and they start in January. So if you want sort of a year-long cohort that you will write with and get to know pretty well, and I have it on good instincts and information that you actually end up like making real friends. It's very, very exciting. I recommend that at annheffron.com. Adoptee Voices runs shorter classes. They're like 6 weeks long, and they have like a winter and a summer and or not a summer. Anyway, they go by seasons. You get it. They have a class starting next week, which may or may not be full, and then they will have another one that probably starts in late January. If you can tolerate me, I will be teaching a longer version of this class, probably at the end of January into February, where we'll have more time to go over these prompts and we'll go a little bit deeper, and we can kind of, sharing is built more into it, and you can kind of keep a piece and keep working with it. So you can sort of develop something from a wild idea into something that feels like an idea with legs. And then in December, the first 2 Sundays of December, I'm going to do Surviving the Holidays While Adopted, which is a writing class that I'm designing to make you feel good about being you. Because a lot of times writing classes are a little, they ask you to dig deep into uncomfortable spots. And I want to do an experiment where what happens if we dig into the spots that are nice instead of the big scary places. You can go to the scary places anytime you want. Sometimes we can't get out of them. If you're interested in those, I definitely didn't update my website today, but you know, whatever, it'll be around. And emailing me is always allowed. So I do want to thank everybody at AKA for hosting this wonderful event, and please be sure to say hi or wave from screen to screen when you see me. I guess there's no more events tonight, but tomorrow, hopefully we'll all get to hang out and be in community together. And then, yeah, my email is right there, gaske@gmail.com. And I believe thus concludes the speculative truth. So please go out and live your weird speculative lives and then write about it. So thank you so much. So I believe we can stop share.